Thank you so much for joining today. 2 days to go for the budget, and I'm talking to all of you, entrepreneurs in the financial services space. And the only conversation which we all have been hearing, and it has got amplified in the last 1 month, is how stressed our financial institutes. And RBI came with this number, which was honestly very, which has created a lot of conversation and stress, is that the NPAs by September would be around 13.5%, and for PSUs it's going to be 16%. Just want to get your views on what do you read of the market right now, and as entrepreneurs in the financial services space, what would your expectation be with the budget?
Sure, Shraddha. Thanks for having me on. Look, I think to take your first question on directly, I think it's a little more nuanced than an overall number, right? I would actually say that there are three distinct segments today in the economy of borrowers who have actually experienced COVID very differently. And I think the measures need to be tailored. On one extreme, you have borrowers who never really have recovered from lockdown, right? So particularly in sectors like hospitality, travel, etc., who frankly went under moratorium and just haven't seen their businesses come back entirely. I think there we need a kind of a very systematic, empathetic kind of framework to be able to ensure that these businesses are able to either get back on their feet or are able to kind of wind down in orderly fashion and reboot to a sense, right? Everyone deserves a second chance. So I think having a kind of a framework through online dispute resolution or however else help these businesses kind of reboot in a sense coming out of COVID is super important. I think the second is there are businesses that did suffer during lockdown and are now starting to pick up again, right? So I think a lot of supply chains, particularly with the big push of Atmanirbhar, are starting to pick up in agri, food, etc. These businesses need fuel to grow, right? And we are also seeing that those who have taken loans since lockdown are actually performing at much better risk rates than even people who took it before because they've withstood the worst of COVID, right? So I think there we need credit flow to resume. I think there's two main things that the government can do there. I think the first is to expand the credit guarantee scheme and improve transmission for these borrowers are looking to kind of get their businesses back on track. And I think the second is fiscal stimulus, right? I think clearly, I think most of the financial sector felt the liquidity transmission of the initial measures under TLTRO, etc., didn't quite get the degree of kind of impact that they were meant to. So I think it's definitely worth a second shot like some other countries are taking. And then I think there's a third category of business that have actually done very well through COVID, right? I think digital first businesses, education businesses focused on technology. And I think we need to figure out how to get these entrepreneurs the tools to grow really, really fast. And so there, for example, kind of tax breaks for angels investing in new digital businesses coming out of COVID, tax breaks for Indian corporates to make strategic investments into these kind of businesses will create an Atmanirbhar ecosystem of Indian capital to support Indian ideas that are starting to really see scale after COVID.
Subodh, tell me, what would you say? What should the government be doing right now?
So going back to the previous question, so that I think, you know, high growth GDP is important for NPA stuff to go away, right? I think one high growth cycle of 3-4 years will take care of a lot of NPAs. I think to that extent, as long as if the business is around, it hasn't gone down due to COVID or due to the issues. I think a couple of years of high growth will actually bring the business back up. So I would say the focus of the budget should be to do things that will create a 12%, 15% GDP growth for next year. I think IMF forecast say 11.5%, but then again, you know, we also went down by 7.5%. So there is a lot of base effect. If we knock it off, it's effectively 4%, right? So I think probably we need more than 11.5% growth next year. And I think, you know, I would say the government probably needs to look at measures that boost the growth, overall growth of the economy across consumption and manufacturing. Plus the liquidity issue that Shashank talked about, you know, the liquidity measures did not really reach a lot of pockets, right? So I think that was unevenly distributed when all these measures were taken. I think it's imperative that liquidity support is distributed fairly, and then do everything to get the economy back up, starting from consumption. So leave more. As they say, you know, leave more cash in the hands of eventual consumers so that they can buy. and they can travel more, and as a result, overall consumption sort of goes up. I think I would say, um, leave more in the hands of customers through some rationalization of taxes. For example, one of the pet peeves has been around this whole LTCG issues, right? Particularly around equity investments, or GST rationalization. There are multiple levers that are there to leave more leave cash. What has happened in the past is the government is aware, but it's been tinkering a little bit here and there. For example, 6 months ago there was a scheme where instead of PF contribution being 12%, you could make 10%. I think it's a great move, but 2% does not make a difference.
But Subbu, I have to tell you, I was also excited, but it is only for companies who have 100 employees.
Right.
Yes.
And also 2% won't make a difference, right? Like you need more than that, right? So one is tinkering here and there. The other one is like a really serious big move that dramatically enhances the purchasing power of customers, right? So I think to me that will have a direct impact on the overall GDP numbers. And as economists say, one serious economic cycle will take care of all the NPAs.
I'll just like to add on to what Shashank and the points Shashank and Subbu said. We have a unique vantage point of having two businesses. One of them was international travel, and you know where it is today compared to where it was before before the pandemic started. And the second business is all about blue collared employees and typically in manufacturing and service space. So we have this to look at how what is happening around. And adding to what Shashank was saying, that while travel, we think especially international travel is completely devastated, including our business and including anybody who was to do with the hospitality, international travel. It's really, really badly hit. But what we saw on the other side, which is the blue collared manufacturing space and the services space, that starting July there has been a momentum up. So much so that the last numbers I saw for the quarter, which is October, November, December, at least from our point of view in terms of what is happening, the activity is really frantic. And turnaround in terms of growth, in terms of business coming back, is very near or almost there in those sectors. So if you are able to support sectors through a bad loan bank or whatever, I don't know what's going to happen. The hospitality sector and the certain sectors which are hit bad, the others are ready to bounce back, and they should be provided enough liquidity. So whether it is, if you look at inflation today, it's very much under control. In fact, wholesale inflation is maybe it'll go below zero if we continue this way. So there is an opportunity to cut rates. There is maybe an opportunity to reduce the reserve ratios. So provide a lot of liquidity in, so that the industries which are doing good, and we are in this unique position where you have Europe where the pandemic is raging, you got China where nobody trusts anymore, and you got India where everybody believes the COVID is over. So I was in Goa a couple of days back, and it's mad. I mean, there are thousands and thousands of people on the beach. So domestic tourism is just gone through the roof. So government should support not only that domestic tourism, but this whole mentality in India that the COVID is done with is actually good for consumerism, for manufacturing, for investments. And probably we are very few places or countries in the world where people are having this positive mentality. And this budget should really, really push in money to take the momentum up on manufacturing, on construction, domestic tourism, all of these things. And coming to the point which Subbu was making, with successive budgets, we have just reduced the money in hands of people. That's been the going forward. So if you look at some very, very small thing but a big impact, for second housing loan, if you took your interest unlimited used to be waived off from your income tax return. Now that was a very small move where he said, okay, it's no longer unlimited, it's only 2 lakhs. But what it does is, for anybody who can afford a second house, it just kills the whole proposition of buying a second house. And there are like hundreds and thousands of people who want to buy a second house, who want to look at one more way of investment other than just stocks or FDs, and you just completely kill that. Similarly, if you look at your international travel, whenever it comes back, this new introduction of 5% TCS above 7 lakh. Now nobody knows how to implement that 7 lakh, because I don't know whether you spend 7 lakh or not. So what I do as a safety measure is, whenever you do an international spend, I first deduct your 5%. And then after 5-7 days, I'll realize whether you've crossed the 7 lakh threshold or not, and you return. These are all crazy things. There's no need to do this. That 0% thing on UPI transactions. I mean, that is something going good. So why break anything which is good? And all the budgets, unfortunately, the past have been trying to break anything which is happening good. So maybe we hope this budget will be slightly different. That's all I would like to say.
I want to ask all of you, and particularly to you, Shashank. I was reading this, that between 1999 and 2003, when the NPAs were very high in China, then China created something called bad banks. They were called bad banks, which were basically all the assets, or the liabilities, rather, not assets. So these were asset management companies who took over the liabilities of the bad debt. What would you suggest? Do you think that we need a very reformative measures when it comes to NPAs, or to look at NPAs? Because it's not just the pandemic. Pandemic has accelerated, but before that also we were seeing a compression when it came to the lending businesses.
No, I agree, Shraddha. And I think actually one of the areas where we were weaker as a country compared to other economies was that our banking sector was weak when COVID hit.
Yeah.
Whereas in other countries, banking sectors were actually doing very well. So look, I think the bad bank is like probably the most debated policy idea that people have done the least about ever. So I'm a little skeptical as to whether that's something we can pull off. But I think the solution has to proceed on two fronts, right? You need a cleanup job and you need a growth job.
Yeah.
You said growth is the ultimate answer to NPAs, right? I think the cleanup job does require a recapping of parts of the banking system, right? Especially in the public sector. And it probably does require a sort of bad banks or ARC-esque approach to kind of doing a one-time cleanup a lot of the large corporate NPAs sitting in the balance sheets of the banks. And I think that needs to happen. It's a journey we started like several years back, and we need to just complete it and move on with life. At the same time, you need to basically create new capital vehicles that are chasing growth and have a playbook to chase growth. And the only way you can do that is actually by creating new banks, to put it very clearly, right? You can't expect banks to recap and clean up on the one hand and grow at the same time. It's very hard. And today we have probably PSU banks are 60% of the nation's balance sheet. And we have the fewest banks, I think, per capita for a country of this scale. And so one of the things I'd love to see actually is a policy around doubling the number of banks in the country over the next 5 years. Be through new licenses like the SFBs were, or you could look at a new digital banking license. It could look at upgrading a bunch of NBFCs into banks. But ultimately, I think that India could have 50, even 100 new banks that should be ideally companies that have developed expertise in a sector or in a set of sectors that are growing and are proven. And I think that dual approach of having a set of banks that need to be cleaned up and a set of banks that are growing, you need both to actually solve the problem of NPAs and kind of allow credit growth to come back into the system.
Have you applied for a banking license?
No, we have not. I think we have still some way to go in our journey. But I think certainly, I think if new kind of licenses come, like for example, Singapore has introduced digital banking licenses, right? And there has been talk about similar models in India. I think something like that would be a game changer. I mean, not just for us, but for all aspiring lenders.
You are in the trenches. You've been in the trenches in this pandemic as entrepreneurs, looking at your business and taking on the onslaught which has come and surviving and hopefully growing. Tell us, from while you are in the battlefield, what are some of the learnings and lessons and signals that you're getting from the consumers? Because, we can have a very bird's eye view when it comes to India, because every number is so large that we can say that, okay, this is the shift, this is the momentum. But what are you seeing in your business right now when you are interacting with your customers?
A couple of things I'll say, one on investments and one on consumption, right? One signal that comes from the customers or investors in general, and there's enough data to show, is there is a lot of risk capital available within India, right? It's a question of how can we channel it. For example, you take a look at any IPO that's come up. Pretty much every IPO gets 1 to 2 lakh crore worth bids. To put it in perspective, the total equity mutual fund AUM in this country is 12 lakh crores, right? So that gives you a sense of the risk capital that's available in this country that is waiting for it to be channeled to the right set of places, whether it is infrastructure bonds or new banks where people could keep deposits, or more companies going public, more private investments within India, domestic capital. I mean, sky's the limit in terms of how you can channel that money into the right area. So one point one clear signal that we see is the top 5% of this country has sufficient risk capital and liquidity available to be able to invest in various initiatives. The second, from a consumption, is I think people have talked about it, at length. I mentioned about this whole how the rebound effect of domestic tourism, right? I think the rebound effect is clearly seen in pretty much every aspect of consumption, whether it is travel, whether it is apparel, vehicle, motors. I think the consumption story or ability of Indian consumer to keep buying, I think it's very, very strong. I think it has withstood COVID. I think withstand any kind of crisis. So again, the takeout from a government and a policy perspective is that, look, in a relatively tough year where there have been job losses, there have been companies that have been shut down. If you're seeing such a significant rebound effect, imagine if it was all doing really great and people really had the confidence in going ahead and making those purchases, which goes back to the point I was trying to make. Look, let people have more cash in their hands so they could go and do more with their consumption. They could buy more stuff, right? So I think those are the two things that at least I have observed. One is ability to take risk with their capital in a certain segment of the population, and a large scale pent-up demand for all kinds of product, goods and services to be consumed. So both of them are available to us. It's just a question of, are we able to channel it in the right direction so that it has a multiplier effect on the economy?
Yeah. So again, if I were to split my business into 2-3 parts, so let me look at those people who for whom we have deposit like partnerships with banks, which are like co-branded savings accounts. So let us, if I were to just look at a small savings account portfolio from my vantage point where it is, what we're seeing is that the average balance maintained in a savings account has significantly shifted up, which means the disposable income with every passing month is increasing for a lot of users. I would say for at least, from what I'm seeing, 70-80% users, the balances just keep going up, which may not be good news for people wanting to lend their money, but the thing is that for the people who not got impacted because of the jobs or whatever happening, suddenly the disposable income has gone up. Now, as a resultant thing, the good thing for the second part of the deposits is investments, where Subbu and we have a little portfolio. Subbu will have a much bigger view to look at. We have 30-40% of the people who've got savings account wanting to or have opened up wealth accounts, and out of them around 12-15% are first time investors. So you're getting a lot of people with extra capital now want to try it out, want to do SIPs, want to do international mutual funds, purchase something like Motilal Oswal kind of funds, and so we are seeing a lot of such capital being there available either as deposits or going into mutual funds or going into equity. Of course, everybody's aware that we are, if I were to just take the number of Demat accounts open in the last 3 months, we've I think broken all records. And one is because it's become easy, and second because there's disposable capital to go ahead and do that.
I just want to ask you here, and just for the record, is that what you're talking about is primarily the 5% of Indian population, right? The disposable income going up, it's in that segment.
So any segment which has not lost their jobs, Shraddha, the disposable income is short up because you're not going to restaurants anymore. You're not about to go abroad. Where do you spend the money? Kids are at home. So basically the gym classes and the tuition classes and all that. I mean, hardly basically maybe you spend on Baiju or something like that. But beyond that, the disposable income for every segment, which is not impacted or has not lost its job, is actually going up.
Yeah.
So that is getting reflected in some of the points which I made out, and then of course the domestic tourism, which is there for all of us to see. Practically, you go on a weekend, even in Bangalore, if you just step out on a weekend, there's no place. I mean, practically everything is packed. That's one area. And the second, I spoke about manufacturing. So if I were to look at how many new employees were taking salary accounts in manufacturing hubs like Tirupur, like Gurgaon, like Manesar. I mean, it is already above where we were in January of last year. So manufacturing activity is really going good. Services, all of us are aware. At least the Amazon of the world and anything to do with e-com, they're hiring big time. So from that point, you come back to the again to very few segments which are impacted, but otherwise we see whatever numbers are being put up in terms of 10-12% GDP growth in 2021. We see more of that coming. And government has a huge responsibility now to really walk the talk and make a really meaningful budget. As I've we've not mincing words. All our past budgets have been tinkering, but this is a chance to really do big in terms of infrastructure investments. We are flush with the capital. Our foreign reserves are maybe highest, of course, highest ever at $600 billion. Now we won't wait for another crisis to happen. We should invest it now. It's a good time to do that.
Vinay, what I'm hearing from you and Subbu from you is that what some of the economists are saying, that the worst is behind us.
Absolutely.
Are you saying, yeah? You're saying the momentum happening.
Now, how much do you make use? See, every crisis is something it can be made use of. So this is really a crisis which India can emerge extremely strong if really right things are done in the next couple of years.
Yeah, and in this budget, I hope, as you say, it's not a tinkering, but it's a solid, strong, and loud and clear messaged budget.
Just that you keep increasing income tax and making it more complicated than it was ever before. Today
I hope the government doesn't increase income tax, because that's coming from all quarters, that no income tax increase should happen. But now you're saying disposable income has increased. So now if the government listens to this, then they might increase the income tax.
We are already at 43.5 peak tax. I don't know any growing economy which is there.
Yeah. But Shashank, I want to hear from you, because you are, in a segment which is looking for capital. Tell me, what has this year been like?
You guys said that maybe the worst is behind us. I'll actually strike a more optimistic note even than that. I think when we look back, COVID will obviously be a once-in-a-generation tragedy, but I think it'll also go down as India's second Jio moment. I think the acceleration of digital adoption at a mass level that has happened in the last 9 months is something that has kind of eclipsed Demon or anything like that. I think it's been staggering. I think we all have stories about how even our parents or grandparents have resorted to doing things online in the last few months out of necessity, right? Just to give you an example, on our personal finance app, Walnut, this Diwali, we saw that online shopping was up 250% compared to the quarter before COVID. And offline shopping was at 60% of pre-COVID levels, right? And a lot of those trends have continued. And I think that shift is significant, and it's permanent and here to stay. We have a product called Buy Now, Pay Later, where we allow people to basically buy online on credit. Typically, every Diwali, we see a spike, but it's highly concentrated in the top cities. This time, we saw purchases coming from over 8,000 pin codes across the country, right? From cities as small as the Northeast and all of tier 2, tier 3, etc. So I think the shift to digital commerce is real. I think it's going to be permanent. And I think with that, credit and financial products will be dragged online. And I think that that transformation happening in such a short period of time means that the entire landscape of products, players, etc., is going to go through tremendous change. And so I actually think, I think many of us as businesses have doubled down on digital in the last 9 months. I think if India can do that as a country, and if the budget actually has an element of industrial policy that focuses on building up our digital industries, whether it's in healthcare or clean tech or e-commerce, etc.
Taxation front, I just want to add to what Vinay said. He talked about peak tax rate of 43%, right? I think, if you just put the whole chain in place for you earn 100 rupees and you pay 42 rupees as tax, you save 58, you're left with 58. Of that 58, you go and spend 30 rupees outside. On the 30, you pay 18% GST.
Yeah.
Then you're left with 20, 25, and then you go and invest that in some asset. And on that, you pay long-term capital gains tax. So if you look at from the origin till the destination, I think it's very obvious that it's an overtaxed value chain, both on the expenditure side as well as on the income side. I think one sincere hope would be that there is a rationalization at each of these levels. Of course, GST does not possibly come under the purview of this budget. That probably requires GST counts, but at least the taxation on assets and sale of assets and taxation on income, I think both squarely come under the purview of the budget. And let's hope there is some rationalization over there.
Have you ever, I don't remember, have you ever seen taxation going down? Not on the lowest income level?
So for the corporates, they reduced the peak tax rate from 30% to 25%.
No, in personal, I'm saying personal.
Yeah, of course. In fact, Shraddha, if you look back to the days when our economy really shot through the roof, the 90s to 2000, practically every budget, the rate was going down. If finally, I think it was Chidambaram's budget in I think 99 or something like that, when the tax rate was slashed to 30%. After that, it's been going up again. See, at one point in emergency, it was 80%, but that was a different world altogether. But yeah, we have seen 30%, and the collection was great. And if you look at any developing economy, look at Brazil, I don't think we are indifferent. So the current rates extremely high. One sector which is extremely critical for employing a lot of people, which is construction.
Yeah,
I mean, you have to look at what if you want to register your house today. It's like anywhere between 7 to 12%. At a rate which is fixed circle rate. No, the economy is already in recession. So just to give an example, your house will be selling at 5,000 rupees square feet, but you have to pay tax at 10,000 rupees square feet because the circle rate is fixed at the time when economy was booming.
And the rate of the house will be so high that the rent you will get from there will also be so less that you'll keep on paying rent and not make money.
Yeah. So the housing sector, I think they really need to do something if the government really wants employment to come back to construction.
Now coming to look at some of the brighter green shoots which have actually emerged, and Shashank, like you said, that the different pin codes that you saw, people, this Diwali shopping and getting people using your app. What is your buy now and pay later app called?
No, so we actually work with several partners like Amazon and others to offer this product to customers, right? And it's essentially a digital first product that allows people to apply on an e-commerce site for credit and get approved there and then for a credit facility that they can use to shop, right? And it works both as a convenience product and an affordability product. And I think the reason this is actually particularly interesting in the last 1 year is it's been a trend that's happened across the world, right? So you have a firm just IPO'd a few weeks ago in the US. And I think across the world, we're seeing a huge shift of, just as Subbu and others will see a shift of people from offline investing and trading to online investing and trading. And we've seen some funny examples of that this week with gaming. But I think on a more sane note, I think we're seeing people moving from more traditional products like credit cards, loans, etc., to more kind of digital credit products like buy now, pay later, which are actually designed for the online experience, right? And can be accessed within a few seconds. And what we see is like a large percentage of the customers are millennials. A large percentage don't have a credit card or are just starting on their credit card journey. So this is really the next wave of consumers in India, who I think will actually now coming out of COVID will experience the entire economy in a digital first manner. And so automatically they will be looking for products that are digital first rather than the last 10 years where we were trying to convince people can stop using their traditional offline analog products and shift to digital. And I think that's a major change for India, right? We can build for customers who want our product on day one rather than having to wait for kind of fundamentals to catch up or wait for behaviors to change.
Shashank, I'm picking up on what you said, that you saw different PIN codes from different parts of the country. And Subbu, I remember talking to you recently where you talked about the small towns and cities and people there having wealth and money and consumption capacity and consuming. I think somewhere let's bring that to a conversation, because India is no more about the few towns that we are all living in, but growth is coming from these pockets. So, tell us about some of the things that you saw.
So in the last 1 year, one of the things we saw was the demand for investing avenues went through digital means. Part of the reasons was people had more time, so they were exploring. Another reason was what Vinay mentioned, they had more disposable income, so there was more time, there was a little bit more money. Whoever didn't lose a job, so those were all exploring. So I think the demand from tier 2, tier 3 towns for us has been spectacular. In fact, I think in the last 1 year, 3 out of 4 customers we've added are non-metro customers. In fact, not from the top 10 cities, if you will. So one is that dynamic of having some money to invest. I think the second one is the sheer risk-taking ability of an average investor has gone through a paradigm shift. So it's no more that FD seeking customer, safety seeking customer who says, look, I'll put my money in an FD and I'll get 5%, 6% return, and I want my safety. Right? So I think the digital risk taking ability has gone up significantly, and a lot of this is driven by tier 2, tier 3 towns. Unlike US, not everyone is going through the trading route. Thankfully, they're going through other traditional investment avenues, which is where, while Indian regulator is conservative, maybe that also helps, because something like GameStop would never happen in India. Because our regulatory environment is so conservative that there's no chance of something like this even remotely, happening, right? So
something we can feel proud about, the regulations that we all have to go through.
Yeah, so I think the risk-taking ability and wanting to participate in the overall wealth creation, people looking long-term. I think these are things that when we started Fisdom 5 years ago, were not there. I think there has been a clear paradigm shift in some of those things in the last 4 years. Definitely, COVID year, thanks to additional availability of time and money with some of the customer segments, I think they've driven this tier 2, tier 3 adoption for all kinds of investment products. I would say I think that's something that we've seen in our numbers, and the industry has also seen in some of those numbers.
Last, before I let you go, one thing you had to say, all of you, each one of you, one thing you would like to see in this budget.
If you ask me, the one thing I would say, it will be government spending. They have to spend big time on infrastructure to ensure that there is enough liquidity for other businesses.
Rationalize taxes and tax administration. Reduce taxes, don't give tax incentives and rebates, which just complicates the matter for you, your HR team, and the tax officials. Keep the tax administration simple, and reduce the taxes and remove as many rebates and discounts, etc. possible, so that customers have more money with them, so that they can go and spend in whatever they want to spend.
Mine would be liquidity, Shraddha, right? I think this is the moment, probably when the first set of liquidity measures came out, we were in the middle of a lockdown. Businesses didn't even know. That was more emergency cash to keep people going. I think now we need the economy to kind of roar again. And for that, businesses need credit, individuals need credit. So I think liquidity will be on the top of my wish list. And along with that, some changes to the financial architecture as well of the system. So the flow of liquidity is a lot better than last time.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for taking out time and sharing your insight.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Thank you. Thanks.